Welcome to an SFB Addict video. How to do play by electronic mail using the Starfleet Battles Cadet Vassal module. Basically, there's two ways of doing it. With the log file function, you can record basically every mouse click and action that you perform, and when you end that log file and send it to your opponent, they can open it up and literally step through each action that you've done and they can see it. That's the way it's done. The two methods is to either immediately begin a log file when you open the file or the game, do your actions, end the log file, send it to your opponent, and that way they get a refresher of everything that's happened since the first impulse. So this is how it would work. You do your actions, save your file, send it to your opponent. Your opponent opens the file, begins the log file, steps through your actions, which re-records those actions, then performs their actions, ends the log file, sends it back to you. You open it, begin the log file, start playing the actions all over again from the very beginning, which re-records it all, add your actions, save it, send it back. So each time you begin the log file and start from the beginning, you are re-recording all that information. That's how it gets played back for your opponent. That's method one. The second method is to not create a log file until after you have played through your opponent's actions until you reach the end of those actions. Then you begin the log file, perform your actions, save the log file, and send it back. So it's the difference between replaying everything from impulse 1 to the current impulse versus only playing just this current last set of actions. So here we've moved everything once, saved the file, played it back once as the opponent, and now we're going to move the units again as if we were the other opponent kind of thing. Now this is the scenario 1 where all the drones move, then the Fed has to move and try and shoot them kind of thing. So it's not really much of a game, but it's an example of how to create the log file. Okay, now I am going to put everything back where it was because we've moved everything 2 hexes. And if I just simply load the file, none of the counters get moved, so I'm putting them all back to their original spots kind of thing. Oops. Can't remember if I just moved the Fed or not. Anyway, let's just go ahead and load it. So we load the example. We immediately begin the log file, save it. We play through what's happened before. As you can see, we can see the counters moving because I put them back to their original hexes. Here's the second movements. Now we're at the end of the movements. So since I've played these movements while a log file has been running, it's put those actions into the new log file. And then I would do my new movements. Save the log file. Now, my opponent will again open the log file. And normally begin the log file. But here I'm not going to begin the log file. So Now I didn't move the counters back and I didn't close the room, bring the room up, so these counters are going to show on the screen where they're at currently in addition to where they're moving, so they'll jump as we move them, kind of thing. So don't let that distract you from the example. But as you can see, I'm going through it from what would have been impulse 1, and here's what would have been impulse 2, and here's what would have been impulse 3, and we just reached the end of the movement. So if I click one more time here, it's going to prompt me to create a log file. This is the second method. You play through what's been done and then you create a log file, and it only records just your new actions. So let's just move the Fed a couple times here. That'll be that action, and then we end the log file. So that would be sent back to the other player. They again load the file. Now before I start playing it, I'm going to move the Fed back over here. Okay, now I'm going to play the file. So it's only the Fed that's going to be moving. So it moved from that hex to that hex. Now it went a little wonky here because of my movement of the counters. So I'm just going to do a run refresh. And I put it back to the hex that it's supposed to be in. But you could see the red square moving where the ship would have been moving. That's the second method, where it only records just the new stuff. So there you go. Those are the two methods on how to play back actions for play by electronic mail or by electronic file transfer, however you want to call it. The only thing about playing by electronic mail, the old-fashioned way, is that you had to put in a lot of conditional orders. Things like, if the range gets to range 15, stop for new orders. If the range gets to range 12, stop for new orders. If your ship turns port at range 5, stop for new orders. That sort of thing. Or if the plasma ship launches plasma, stop for new orders. Or if this happens, then perform this action. Or if that happens, perform that action. A lot of conditionals like that would have to be given, because in traditional play by electronic mail, both sides submit orders, and a moderator looks at both sets of orders and proceeds through the impulses as far as they can until a conditional order has been met or new orders are needed. But with the vassal module, you can step through the orders in a fairly simultaneous method. So as you call out your impulses, if your ships are far apart and you've set your speeds and everything's set up and ready to go, you can just simply go through the impulses, move your ships when they're needed to move, and if you need to perform an action, you can perform that action. So if you're far apart, it's not going to matter really too much where you're moving, but if you're range 15 and under, it will start to make a difference. So you have to stop more often and send the file back and forth more often. So you have to kind of be proactive in how you do this. So if you know you're not going to be firing for the next 2, 3, 4 impulses, you might want to volunteer that information just so those impulses can be processed fairly quickly. Now, that does give up some information that your opponent knows you're not going to be firing for the next 4 impulses, but if you're range 35 apart, it's kind of blatantly obvious that you're probably not going to be firing for the next 4 impulses. And when you're swapping the file back and forth, either one of you can proceed through the sequence of play steps. So it really helps if you state proceed up until X stage. Go no further than dogfight stage, or continue until we get to range 6, or continue until we get to range 12. You can type those sort of conditional orders right in chat, and those will be revealed as they play back the actions. Now, if your ships are really desperate speeds, like somebody is speed 6 and somebody is speed 14, then the person that's going speed 6 isn't going to move an awful lot. The person going speed 16 is. So you know that if you process through 3 impulses, it's going to be 3 movements of the ship that's going speed 16. So the person that's going slow might want to put in a conditional order saying, go ahead, do your movement up until the point that you reach such and such a range, or until you turn left or turn right, kind of thing. And that person can process through those 3 movements and move their ship 3 times. And then they send the file back. The opponent now knows where the speed 16 has moved. They then proceed through the next impulse, or the sequence of play for that impulse. You might just be doing movement until such and such a condition, or you might actually be close enough that you're going to start launching drones, start firing, etc. When you get closer and more things are on the board, things are going to slow down. You're going to be sending more files back and forth for each stage. So if you know for a fact you're not going to be firing on an impulse, if you volunteer that, then that person knows that you're not firing. They may not be firing either, and they can just simply proceed to the next impulse. But if they don't know that you're not firing, then they need to process through the steps, movement, tractor, launch, transporter, fire, etc., to see if you're doing anything on each and every step. And that's a file being swapped back and forth for each step, which slows things down. So putting in conditional orders in the chat helps speed things up. You can also do orders in the public-private notes delayed tab for simultaneous fire. So you can create an order. So on impulse 8, turn 1, impulse 8, fire stage. These names have to be unique, so it helps put in turn and impulse, so it makes each note unique. You can put in turn 1, impulse 8, fire stage, firing phaser number 3 at drone 1. And it's there. It's not revealed, but it's there. When you click save, it puts it in chat that you've created something. So if your opponent goes to the public and private notes, and they click on it, all they see is this up here. This is blank down below to them, until you come in here and you click reveal. So you can create a fire order, send the file to them. They can create the fire order and reveal the fire order, since you've already done yours, send it back to you, and then you reveal the fire order for yourself and do your die rolls, send it back to them. They now see your revealed orders, they do their die rolls, and you both do damage, kind of thing. So you can see how things go on. You notice there I clicked save and it didn't do the reveal. So to reveal, you've actually got to click reveal. So that puts a check mark here. And when you click save, it puts it in the chat that it's been revealed. And then when they go in, they can click on it and they can actually see it. It's no longer blank. So that's pretty much how you do play by electronic mail. It's not as tedious as doing it the old-fashioned way with a moderator, but you should and do have to be very proactive in letting your opponent know that they can proceed up to such and such a stage and no further. But if they do something, you can always respond to it. So for instance, if you say proceed up to impulse 10 movement stage, but on impulse 8 they launch something, you can at that point say, well, you did a new action on impulse 8 that I want to respond to, and respond to it after that stage. But you can't let it proceed up to impulse 10, do your fire stage, and then at that point go back and say, oh, I wanted to do something else in response to your impulse 8. You have to stop doing things to respond to an earlier action that you have a legitimate right to respond to. So if your opponent were to have launched that shuttle on impulse 8, but then proceeded to impulse 10 and pulled up fire orders, when you get the file, you do not put in your fire orders. At that point, you type in chat you wanted to do an action in response to whatever on impulse 8, state what that action is going to be, and then send the file back without entering in fire orders. Your opponent sees that new action and then considers whether or not they're going to change their fire orders and then again sends the file back to you for that impulse's fire orders, and at that point then you can enter your orders. So you have to prevent things from proceeding past the point you want to respond to something earlier, but you can't receive that file for impulse 10 for fire orders, enter in your fire orders, and then say, oh yeah, and then I wanted to retroactively do something else. You've got to stop it from proceeding further, do the legitimate response, and then proceed on. So hopefully that makes sense to you. This is a quick little video on how to do play-by-mail or file transfer using Vassal engine for Starfleet battles. Cadet, have fun.